We are continuing on Chapter 1, Opting into Media. So let's just look at scheduling and stuff, just to know what's happening. I always feel like before Labor Day in the fall semester, we're just getting going. So it's it'll be a turning point when next week all the registration and everything settles down and we can just get into, the kind of nitty-gritty content of the course. So looking ahead, we have a quiz coming up on chapters 1 to 3. That's on September 14th. So, we'll be, in fact, today I have a little activity to feed you some sample questions that might appear on that quiz on this chapter. And so I'll be doing that for each of the chapters and we'll be reviewing. So that's coming up on September 14th. And that quiz will be available online as well as in class. And then another big thing coming up is on September 26th is our first term paper assignment. So there's 2 longer term papers in this class of about 4 pages each, and the first one's coming up on the 26th. The topics are already available for you. If you just look into the modules, you'll see the second block refers to research papers. So check those out for now. I know we haven't really studied too much, although we've been having some great conversations and stuff. And some of the issues we talked about in conversation will be useful in your research papers. So in the guidelines, it just discusses, how long they have to be, the kind of format, and then under research paper number 1, there are topics. Okay, so for the first research paper, there's a number of topics that you can choose from and write about. And of course, they're all stuff that we will have discussed by then, seen what's in the textbook, and hopefully you'll have some ideas about, what your preference is, what you want to write about and stuff. And we can even bring that into, as we look at those individual chapters, I could tell you, oh, well, this is the information that's pertinent to this term paper topic. So I try to kind of get us thinking as we go along. And so that's coming up on the 26th, which is only a month away. So we'll be, orienting ourselves to that.
So you're saying we're going to start a research paper?
It is less of a research paper and more of an analysis paper. So it doesn't say go and find 10 books in the library. It's more about here's an issue that has arisen in the either history or development of electronic media. Your textbook has something to say about it. What's your position on this? And so you're free to go find more information, but it's not a research paper in the sense that you got to find, more detail.
No, I'm saying it's due.
It's due on the 26th. Yeah. So, well, when we come back from Labor Day weekend, we'll dig into that. And yeah, we can look at the topics, and also I can say, okay, well, this one relates to what we're studying in chapter 1 or 2 stuff. So the papers are kind of lighter on, you don't need a million resources. You need to think about stuff. That's basically it. Okay, and then we got the media diary coming up on September 7th. So are there any questions about that? Or has anyone got some initial thoughts or findings they want to share with us? Olive?
I started it yesterday, and I noticed that when I got really bored at night, or I couldn't sleep, I would just start watching any TV program. Usually it's mypillow.com or Zumba or something like that at 1 o'clock in the morning. But I noticed...
These are streaming services?
I was bored.
No, I just want to know because I don't know.
If it was on my TV.
Okay.
With that, I was able to write about.
Interesting.
Interesting that I'm most likely not the only one who does that at 1 or 2 in the morning.
Yeah. It's a good point. And it comes back to a broad category of media use, which is sort of just like, it's not typically entertainment. It's like emotional satisfaction in a way. It's just, I'm bored. What can you give me so that I'm not bored? Versus I think a lot of the industry would like to think that everything they put out is, designed to entertain us maximally, but programmers in the industry know that people will watch what they have to watch because that's when it's on, when they turn it on. It's like, there are many, many uses and gratifications of media. So that's an interesting one, yeah. I remember talking to this guy, Jerry Dove, who's a community relations manager at Clear Channel, or now iHeartRadio. So, and just saying, we were talking about KISQ FM, which is still on the air, but it's become more of an oldies. It used to be more of a kind of urban oldies. Now it's like everything oldies. Hey, Tony. So anyhow, I said, well, how do you differentiate your station? What do you offer? And he paused and he said, well, it's the kind of thing that nobody wants to, it doesn't make anyone want to turn it off. So that was kind of the best thing that he could say about the show, is it's the least objectionable choice. Anyway, that's cool. Thanks, Olive. Anybody else coming up with any other stuff?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
I use it a lot in the mornings. I find out, just waking up, I'm like, oh, I'm all over scrolling through Facebook or Twitter, whatever the case. Just something to help me wake up as I'm squinting and opening up my eyes. Like, why do I do this?
Are you looking at news, or are you looking at what your friends are doing?
It's more so. It's. I think my mindset is on news, but whatever happens to pop up is going to fill that space.
Yeah.
I'm thinking what's going on in Houston, and then, oh, cool, something funny on Facebook, and.
It's a mix of everything. Yeah. That's a new media type of thing. It's like almost the opposite of Olive, who's she just needs something at a certain time, and that's what's broadcast there. Versus you're more in the morning. I'm not saying you don't use that type of media either, but in the morning, you're going to Facebook, you're opting into it, and you're getting this collage of different things and stuff. Yeah, that's interesting. Gino, and then.
How specific do you want us to be when we do the diaries? Do you want us to log okay, we're at this time we're spending X amount of minutes on this app before we switch to this one?
Yeah, I think that's a little too fine-grained, but if you can come up with an informed estimate, let's say, of how many hours you're using something, or Jonathan's interesting because his idea here is he's thinking about day parts, kind of, so that's another way you might think about it. Is your media use more in the morning, afternoon, late at night, evening, or something? So I'd say that it doesn't have to be as fine-grained as a minute-by-minute tally. And then what you really want to do is to be aware of what is surprising or important. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of saying survey what you're doing, but put your most energy into something that's oh, wow, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. So at the end of the day, we don't need an objective diary, but more a starting off point for you to, just some
basically data, when are you using it most and why, kind of that type of thing. So does that answer it? Again, it is, and I think at an hourly tally over the whole period is enough detail in terms of time and stuff. Okay, and then I wanted to get to you, and sorry, what's your name again?
Daniela.
Okay, Daniela, yeah.
So I've been tracking for a few days. I definitely use my phone the most. I would say out of any media, 90% is definitely my phone. But I've tried this week to not use it at all, but I am flying this weekend, international flight, through Houston.
Oh, wow.
I have layover in Houston. So I need social media right now to check United every single time.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely not using my phone next week, not this week.
Got you.
I really
Okay.
need it right now.
It's too important right now.
The only way I can contact them because
Okay.
the phone, not possible.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're just getting hit up all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to mess anybody's life up. So just give up what you can when you can, and choose your moments. Yeah, you certainly don't have to do more than a day, and less is okay too. Yeah. Everything flying okay through there?
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay, Rin?
So this is the third day of diary, and yesterday I gave up listening to any music.
Wow.
I also play some instruments, but I try not to do that. But yesterday, afternoon after class, around 1 or 2 p.m., when I realized I have already worn the headphone here, and I was about to plug in my cell phone, the plug into my cell phone, and I realized that I'm not supposed to do. And I just realized I am so addicted to listening to the music. So when I usually like when I want to refresh my brain, or when I start doing some other stuff, I always listen to music first, like 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and then I start do new things. So it was kind of very hard for me.
So now that you don't have it, how are you compensating in other ways? Are you using other media to bridge that moment for you?
Yesterday I was trying not. How can I say? I wasn't use only. How can I say? I'm sorry. I only didn't use that music app. So, but I used.
Okay, but you were able to fill in with other apps. No? Okay.
I was just trying not to touch any music, any stuff related to music.
Okay, which is a big part of your life, it seems. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, that's interesting, and interesting. The word addiction comes up again, and also, like we said, even the behavioral. You find yourself getting ready to plug in or something. It's almost a physical habit. Okay, well, these are all interesting insights. You know, if you, I noticed in the textbook, this assignment is sort of where you want to take it largely, and these reflections are already real interesting. I noticed as I was rereading the chapter yet again, because this is a new textbook to me too, at the end of the chapter, there are some interesting questions that it says, well, these are important questions about 10 questions you absolutely should ask about studying electronic media. The answers will surprise you, which sounds like a clickbait headline if I've ever heard one, right? You know, but luckily they're right on the next page. So right up here, they're talking about things that we're talking about. How much time do you spend each week with various forms of electronic media? And then there's some other interesting questions that, you know, if you're ever at a loss for where to go with this, and, you know, you may find some of these questions interesting. Has your electronic media viewing or listening changed now that you are in college? And, and that assumes that you'd all be freshmen or something, which I know is not the case. But it draws attention to, it's a big change of life when you come back to school or when you're in school, and it kind of changes a lot of demands on you, for information processing. I think students now they have a really, overwhelming load of information that they literally have to handle. If it's in my news feed and it blows by me, it doesn't really matter, but if it's in my syllabus and I don't attend to that information, I'm kind of at a loss, So does that open up any doors for thinking about your media habits, your media use, particularly as you are students?
Oh, definitely.
Tony, I'll go to Tony first and then over to you, Mason.
Hi, good morning. This is, one, I don't have cell phone service on this, so I got rid of it. Too many headaches, too many people calling.
Okay, but you were going to tell us about
I'm going to tell you that
student and media.
as student in media, I have to use this my phone for reading assignments, going on Canvas. I don't have a computer at home, so this is it.
I think one thing I can pull from there is that this piece of media is so important right now.
So
in your
important,
life.
super.
Well, you'll see, I'm asking people to give something up for a brief period of time. I actually said a day, but I'm realizing what a sacrifice it would be for a lot of people. But just giving something up for a brief period of time in this assignment to see how much they depend on certain electronic media. Mason.
About the educational part with the media, like how she was saying at night, like if I was working, or when I was working full-time during the summer, so I was doing classes last semester, kind of trying to get a little part-time in, mix it up. But so during the summer I was doing full-time, and sleeping would be an issue, because when I would think about, I have to get up tomorrow and do the same thing, I wouldn't be able to get any sleep. I'd be up all night watching YouTube or something to try to put me to sleep. And then right when school comes around, kind of get back into the thing of like learning something. I'm like right back at 9, 10 o'clock at night, I'm asleep, no media needed, and because it kind of puts me in a way where I'm not pissed to have to get up and go to work to do that, so I don't stand up stressing about it. So it kind of goes in the opposite direction for me when school comes, so I don't have to worry about it. I just go to sleep, like I'll wake up, don't have to go to work, I can go to school.
Is it because like school satisfies you or tires you out intellectually?
Well, yeah, it's more of a, since I have to think and it's not somebody just saying, do that.
Got it.
Or you're expected to do something all day, it's just different. So
Yeah.
it kind of goes away when I'm not stressed in the way of work, you know. So
Well, that's
education helps a lot with that.
that's I'm glad to hear that. That's a good thing for me to hear every now and again too. So I'm glad that's your experience. Did you want to say, Jonathan, before we move on?
Just more personal on my aspect. Yeah, I mean, ever since being a student, I'm using electronic media in a different way, as far as using Kindle or whatever the case for research, reading my books, for school books or whatever the case, and just using the laptop for Canvas or whatever specific course it is that has whatever specific necessary format. And so just going back and forth. So I'm spending a lot of time, like a few hours every night, doing that. So that changes your lifestyle for sure. And for me, particularly my last job, I was in sales a lot, so I was using social media all the time, Facebook all the time. So for me, it was work, and I hated social media because of it. So by the time I got done with it, I was just like, swore off Facebook for a few months, everything for a few months. I just walked away from it. And then once school kicked up, I was like, okay, I'm gonna hop on and unfriend these 6,000 people I never met, and freaking keep my little 80 friends I have, and change my photos around. Like, okay. And then I just hop on it like once a week and scroll through it. Like today, weird circumstance this morning, I wake up and I scroll through it. I'm like, why? I haven't been on this all week. Why do I care? It's because of news. Yeah.
But a real change in the balance of the media that you're using.
Yeah.
Partly related just to changing job and functions, and things you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm inclined to jump over a little bit of the historical parts of this chapter, because we'll be coming back in more detail next week to talk about the early electronic media, especially radio, and then the week after we'll get into, you know, broadcast TV as it developed from, you know, over the air to cable to what it is now, streaming and stuff. So I think we've covered a fair bit of that. Just a reminder of some things that I still think were sort of key. You know, again, the clustering of innovation on the most recent part of the timeline. So, you know, what is it, Moore's Law, which is that, you know, you know, the idea originally was about computers, but there's like a doubling of computer power through every period, and that innovation just keeps on picking up faster and faster. So, I mean, there's something to be said when you look at that, those things going up. Mason?
There's a picture, I think, in World War II where they're transporting, I think it's 5 megabytes of information stored on, I don't even know what you would call it, some kind of memory device, and it's probably as big as like 5 people.
Oh my God.
And it's a pretty cool picture because it's right smack dab right there in the, it's the 40s and 50s.
Right, right.
It's pretty crazy to look at.
Yeah, history of computing, right? It's like a 16 kilobytes of memory, and it takes a room or something. Right?
It's not even like a little chip on our credit cards anymore.
Yeah, right. Incredible. And what else? Yeah, so, you know, if we're talking about revolutions, you know, really critical periods, you know, definitely the telegraph with electronic media, the newspaper as being like the first mass medium, and then later on, you know, digitization and all the changes that it has brought about, you know, digitization in giving us more channels in any, you know, given broadcast channel, or even on a cable network or something, or a cable service provider can go from, you know, offering maybe 20 channels to literally hundreds of channels and such. And you know, all the many other changes that digitization has wrought that we can look in more detail. I think that's definitely been a really key thing. And now with, you know, the networking of computers and stuff, it's giving us social media, the internet, the web, and interactivity. As we talked about, more feedback. Our models have to change to sort of account for all of the kind of interactions that can be going on. You know, again, if you look at the classroom as a kind of a broadcast model, the old school lecture where I stand up here and tell it to you, you know, and then now we've got a chat going on, and sometimes it, you know, so it's exactly what that model was trying to get at. Yeah, it was this one, I think, which was trying to express, you know, from the encoding, decoding as it heads out, and then different nodes of consumers processing it, decoding it, discussing amongst themselves. So we're moving. Wow, we've got a modern classroom moving from the mass delivery of information to a different type of model. Whatever. Allow me to riff. I riff too much. Another thing that we'll see, I think, I often hear, especially at the beginning of the semester, broadcasting is dead, And I would just want to put that in a historical perspective. There's no doubt that streaming media is impacting the audience of broadcast media. Absolutely certain. But it's easy to exaggerate a couple of things. Number one is the business impact. CBS, for instance, an old school network, is still as profitable year for year as Google. In all of its activities when you throw them all together. Now, CBS doesn't make all of its money through selling commercials in The Big Bang Theory or whatever. But that's still a big part of their business. So they're kind of diversifying, and I think that's what we're seeing is broadcast is diversifying. Media is, big concept, big empty concept, but media is converging, in the internet, in Tony's mobile, where she's getting text, she's getting the news, she's getting Canvas, she's getting video if she wants, she's getting the equivalent of radio, music streaming and stuff. So when we talk about converging, what we mean is the boundaries that used to exist between media, they're kind of collapsing or getting more porous. So that a CBS, used to just be a television network, I guess, or a radio network that became a television network, so it was more. And then it was, part of a multinational, vertically integrated publishing thing where Simon & Schuster was owned by the parent company, and I guess it was Viacom which owned them, and so there was that huge stack of ownership which still exists there. But they're not just a broadcaster anymore. They're all of those things, and they're streaming, and soon to have a new version of Star Trek up, apparently. Ooh, yeah. Olive?
So I noticed, I watched America's Got Talent on Tuesday, and they tend to, during their voting time period, you can go onto their website, you can go onto their Facebook, you can go onto their Twitter account, you can go onto just calling them. Is that what you mean by convergence?
In part, yeah, and
Different types of ways of communicating?
definitely, yeah. So we're talking both about the way that other media forms can be integrated into old media, or so basically how they, if you think of media as things that can adapt, and that whole the video that we watched, which showed us an ecosphere they talked about eventually. That all this stuff exists in a kind of a audience landscape, and that it gets connected for sure. That bringing in tweeting into voting into a game show would be one example of that, and the other would be more on the consumer end, like I was mentioning with Tony, where or I'm just picking on you, Tony, because you're new and I want everyone to know you here. It's within the phone, due to the internet as well. Basically, you've got video, you've got audio, you've got all these forms, which used to have separate frequencies set aside by different radio frequencies, different television frequencies. Now it's all just coming through the same pipeline, digital pipeline to your phone, which is sort of what we're talking about in convergent. Yeah. So it's an interesting idea. And then just to develop a little bit more on the adaptability of media. So that's the other thing. They don't really rise and fall and become extinct like the dinosaurs. In a sense that you'll find just through the history that these media. Sometimes they have their audience literally cannibalized by another medium, like television stole most of radio's audience, but then radio reinvented itself. Were you thinking about that?
No, I was thinking about how like ABC, NBC, and Fox, most of their broadcasts are on Hulu the next day. So you can watch it again or watch it for the first time, whatever.
Right.
So it's like that's them working with other partners and then getting benefits and profiting off that for
Yeah.
people that are watching it live on TV.
Absolutely. First we saw all channels being kind of aggregated in cable TV, and now, an extension of that is we'll see them all appear in Hulu, or most of them. Except now they're figuring out that they can maybe sell their own app, which is really an interesting thing. But just to finish up with that idea, then that these are all businesses. They develop both a brand and an audience. And so even if it's being challenged, if other media are whittling away at it, they're still valuable things. CBS is a valuable brand for decades to come, for sure. And any business is like, trying to survive in this ecosphere, is going to fight like hell to remain, keep all of its audience and do everything that it can. So you'll find a certain amount of ingenuity, or if you want to go evolutionary about it, media can reinvent itself like radio did. It lost the variety audience. It lost so much to television, but rock and roll came along, and radio reinvents itself by putting popular music on the air. What's happened now? Spotify, and so on. So everyone's streaming music now. Radio is in a terrible period of transition, where it's got to reinvent itself again. So, Richard?
Do you think podcast would be like a, evolutionized version of radio, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great point. Richard's asking, so how do podcasts figure into this? And yeah, I mean, the first thing you would say is, rather than, let's say, podcasts will get everybody to stop listening to radio, look at the current situation where many radio shows are producing themselves as podcasts, or spinning off and making podcasts. And the most listened to podcasts are mostly NPR radio shows. And plus, they also create a lot of original podcasts themselves on NPR. So I think we're seeing, as in so many cases, online media becoming complementary to old broadcast media, and maybe eventually, cannibalizing them, but it's a very slow process. And so I do think there's something to be said that broadcast is dying, but it's just dying a very, very slow and interesting death.
Interesting.
Yeah, like probably the dinosaurs were too. There's probably all kinds of.
Dying, is it?
Pardon me?
It's not necessarily dying,
Yeah, these are all
morphing into something.
loose metaphors. Yeah, morphing. Yeah. Mason, did you want to say something before we go to Gino? Or?
A little like about because a lot of the media that everybody talks about seems to kind of be surrounding news. It's not necessarily everything that people pay attention to, right? Like news, but I was going to say people cannibalize certain audiences to things like, I think it was 2 days ago or yesterday, it was on a podcast. Kevin Durant was on there, and he was talking about, he was not talking crap about Under Armour, but he said that kids don't want to wear Under Armour when they grow up. They don't want to play in Under Armour shoes. And that's just it.
What is
Under
Steph
Armour
thinking?
lost 4% in their stock that day,
Oh my
just
God.
because he said that on a podcast.
Wow.
I was looking at that that's something different, not necessarily news media, but that's the same idea. People are listening. They might have no idea or ever bought Under Armour before, right? They hear that, no, never. And it's
Wow. So it's influential. That's what you're saying? It's
very
influential,
People
so
dig in,
immediate.
and they're like, I'm going to listen to whoever's on that podcast. That's
Right.
how I think. That's how it is.
Interesting. Yeah. At a higher level, the ESPN's troubles have been bringing down Disney stock
Yeah.
incredibly for the last few months, and there's another kind of people just looking at the horizon there saying, I don't think that's going to work, and how that hurts. Gino, did you?
It's sort of happening with music too, in the music industry, and how nowadays a lot of labels don't really like to give a lot of money to bands, or maybe the bands just don't make as much, so everyone kind of has to dedicate themselves and their time to following the bands, or they have to sort of decide whether or not they want to give the band their money, as opposed to, having the majority of the money come from the label, or due to the fact that since the fan base might not be so big, that it causes them to have to get more money, or they do crowdfunding for their albums.
Yeah. That seems to be a great example of what, the chapter when it says opting into new media or whatever, it sounds like it is that process in music that you're describing. It's like, whereas the major labels used to be like a mass organization, they would choose the artists, they were the gatekeepers, they had all the distribution, right, that wrapped up. And now that all that has fallen apart, it's far more of, you know, fans opting into following a band, supporting a band, maybe even, you know, kickstarting or something to put the money up for something that they want to see done, you know, instead of having to go to a corporation that can borrow the money from a bank and give it to them and then take it back. You know? So, yeah, it's an interesting point. It does seem like the music business is following that same general pattern. That's cool. Okay, so yeah, the media can adapt, and of course it's more complicated to talk about it in that way than just, you know, live and die and that kind of stuff. But, you know, we do want to sweat the details here in the university, otherwise, you know, in college, because otherwise where do you sweat the details? It's just like, oh, okay. Pierre says, I think radio totally reinvented itself with the modernization of today's media. So I think Pierre's following in on that idea that you know, radio is a great example of a medium that reinvented itself once and is looking at reinventing itself again. I mean, you know, eventually they're going to take back those FM frequencies, that radio or FM and AM frequencies, and they're going to use them for cell phones. So at that point, I think radio, you know, is going to change for sure.
Radio has already taken away several local channels that I could see that's on FM.
You mean stations that have closed?
Oh yeah, stations
Yeah.
that have closed. Yeah.
And the kind of
I'll tell
they're not
you-
putting much money into morning teams or performers of the way they used to. That's going away.
I mean, radio, for me, radio is really kind of hanging in there in a sense where, you know, 95.7 the game. They're there at every Warriors game. They are the radio
Yeah.
media sponsors for the Golden State Warriors. So they've got a good deal going on, right?
Yeah, yeah. They've got a handle on something
They've got a
that an
handle on
audience
things.
still
Verizon
wants.
Wireless, again, you know, with the big sports industry. So,
Yeah,
because I worked recently with the sports, so the sports industry, I really feel San Francisco Giants, they're keeping radio alive.
yeah.
More than any other entity.
And they're keeping a lot of live television going as
And
well
live
because
television
because
going as
you
well.
want to see the game as it unfolds or hear it.
Yes.
And
'Cause you gotta
once it's
remember-
over, you're not that interested.
NFL season, whether they're mad at the Niners or not, or they're, you know, Raiders are leaving or not, everybody's, you hear it on Facebook, they're all pumped,
Right.
they're all pumped, they're all pumped. They're going to be watching television.
Yeah.
Whether there's no Raiders team here or not, the NFL starts and boom. So
So the issue in the business now is being that the NFL is so greedy that it costs billions of dollars to get the rights to broadcast those games. Plus they play Fox off of CBS and all the rest. So they've pushed the value of that property so far that there's pushback, you know,
Yeah.
you know, there's always a chance also that, you know, so first of all, what things that have happened due to that are things like, you know, a network like CBS going to its local affiliate stations and saying, you know, we pay so much for sports. We used to write you a check every month for being a good station and playing our stuff. We want you now to write us a check because your ratings are really depending on all that money we give to the professional sports leagues and stuff like that. So it's reversed the flow of money whereby local stations now have to pay for that kind of content. And CBS also attacked Time Warner. They said you got to pay us $1 more per each subscriber that you've got on cable. Otherwise, we won't let you show our stuff on your cable network. And Time Warner said, "Oh, I dare you." And CBS pulled it like right before some season finals or stuff, and Time Warner caved and then sort of paid them the extra money. So all of that.
They have their own
is
app,
a-
so they better.
Gotcha. So you know, if you've got content that has an audience, you know, it's a real tussle now because that's really valuable. But also, you know, so much money is being committed to these broadcasting contracts and stuff. You wonder sometimes, can it survive? You know. Anyway, okay. Let's get into the now section. Just look through here about. The textbook gives us kind of like a map with which to distinguish different media. It suggests some categories that any medium can be looked at through these categories, and you can get some sense of what the differences are, what their potentials are to reach an audience. So here they are, just arrayed one after the other. In terms of audience, is it like a mass audience, or does it come down to even a one-to-one type of audience? Which again, if we're talking about telephone calls, I think we're out of the bounds of this course. But yeah, different audience sizes. Like the mass audience that a network television show would get in the millions versus a YouTube channel, which may only have 150 subscribers. But if they're useful, profitable subscribers, it can be a viable business. So audiences, comparing audience size, time. There's an interesting thing. So just to some media are synchronous. The receiver consumes the receiver gets the message and decodes it basically instance after, almost simultaneously with when it's actually broadcast or created. So, broadcast TV where a show airs at a certain hour is an example of a synchronous type of medium. So synchronicity, or in sync, versus asynchronous media, which is where you would post something in an archive, like put a video on YouTube, and then people could get it afterwards. So is that clear? Is there any questioning about that? Synchronous and asynchronous, what they mean? So what would podcasting be, for instance?
Asynchronous.
Asynchronous, I guess. Yeah, right? Because
Unless you're
by synchronous, what I mean is, let's say a show is airing at 10 o'clock on CBS. You got to be there and you watch it at 10 o'clock. And then the show is on Hulu later on, and then it's an asynchronous type of medium, because then you can go and get it and watch it whenever you want. Right? So old media was synchronous mostly. Like when you couldn't record TV, it was like a live broadcast all the time. So live broadcast is an ultimate example of synchronous media. Yeah, Corey? Yeah.
Like a podcast would be asynchronous, but a live podcast, that would be synchronous, right?
Right, so that would be a live stream, I guess. Okay. I think by definition, a podcast is something that is archived and then distributed that way. But yeah, live streaming audio would be synchronous, right?
So what's going on right now with this chat?
This whole thing is asynchronous.
Not a lot of people are on, but regardless.
But in the next hour, it's going to be asynchronous.
Yeah.
Right, then it'll be back there, right? I'm just checking out. As you remind me about that, Brian says, I would argue FM radio is dying, whereas there are still loyal listeners to AM programs such as politics and sports, news talk programs, sports talk programs.
That's right.
We brought it back. But yeah, so we're seeing radio reinvent itself, just like you were saying.
95.7 game. They cover all types of genres.
Got it. So sports and talk, comedy as well.
Comedy.
That's big in podcasts.
KBLX came back strong because, they're really the only R&B station that we have both on any AM or FM dial.
Yeah.
It's the only place outside of your Spotify and your Pandoras that you can still listen to music.
Gotcha.
They bought in a big wheel too. They bought in Rennell, announcer for the San Francisco Giants.
Right.
That was huge.
And star DJ of KMEL,
And
star DJ of KISQ.
Right, exactly.
she goes and goes, right?
Yeah.
She's amazing. Yeah. But bring it back to asynchronous and synchronous then. Are any of these synchronous radio shows that we're talking about, are they also available in podcasts? Like,
Sure.
they come out?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
KPLX has its own apps. You can go back and listen to a morning show a week ago.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So again, we're seeing
both.
broadcast media, which used to be synchronous, also teaming up with asynchronous forms of distribution. It just makes
dual now.
sense.
It's dual.
Yeah,
They
it's dual.
do
I
it
think-
simultaneously. Yeah.
I think that's true. Same in TV. You go to a TV website, even if it's breaking news, you can see the video the day after from the broadcast and stuff. Richard, did you have your hand up? Did I? No? Okay, cool. So we're clear on synchronous, asynchronous, what that means, and we're seeing a lot of examples of both, basically. Display and distribution. right. Just I'd say that's just pretty essential. It's like video, audio, text. Those used to define media. Radio was an auditory medium. Video was on TV, text. To come back to this idea that media is converging, once you digitize media, you basically have a digital pipeline running to some kind of receiver. When I was doing my higher degrees in 1990s, I did a research paper on digital radio, which was bigger. I was living in Canada, it was bigger there. But they would put a digital receiver in a car, and they'd say, well, we can also send you text about promotions. Soon we'll be able to geolocate, so we'll know when you're passing near a Safeway or something like that. We can, give our subscriber base a little digital card. This was before they thought that your phone would just receive it. I mean, half of it's happening now, and half of it's like a year or two away, basically. So, and then they said, and market research shows that parents want to show videos to their kids. So maybe the other thing that we can do, this is radio, maybe we can also stream kids' television shows to show in the back of the car. So, I mean, that was a big surprise to me. Maybe it's not so much to you guys now 20 years later, but to me it was like, oh man, I mean, they're telling me radio used to be radio, right? But once you have a digital pipe going into someone's car, you can put anything in it. Text, video, audio. So that's the trick. And that's where the convergence ultimately arises, And it's just interesting to see, again, because of brand specificity, I think companies hesitate before they move in a big way to do something completely different, like a radio station, becoming a TV channel. But they'll do it. And again, if you're podcasting or streaming your DJs talking about athletes and they have, a star in, you're going to get huge ratings if you live stream that. It's what's usually like a radio show, but you can live stream it and everyone will watch it. So more convergence happening there, I guess. So yeah, it's great to be able to describe media by their display, but what we have to see also is that digitization makes it possible for a channel to be many different types of display, which is pretty wild, I think. So some examples in there. Let's just move on. Let me just look at the chat here. Okay, people have gone quiet for a second on chat. Fair enough. Interactivity again. It's something that I love this idea that you folks were talking about with. It was on game shows, which are bringing in Twitter or various forms of interactivity. So it seems that audiences are expecting their engagement being based in part on being able to interact. So even old media, mass media is still trying to bring in different ways of giving audiences chances to interact, and whether it's shows on the CW, which are proposing hashtags down at the bottom, it's like, hey, discuss this right now on Twitter. You can see them trying, And of course, television sets are now, they have what they call over-the-top TV, which, I mean, you all know about smart TVs. In the business, they call this over-the-top, which is simply television that plugs into the internet. And, so people are losing a sense of whether they're watching something that's streaming online or that's being broadcast on a network coming to them through cable. It's all converging in that way too. So, you're just clicking your remote control and you're going from terrestrial broadcast to cable broadcast to stream stuff on the internet, and there's really no distinction. So more kinds of convergence there, I guess. But those TVs could bring interactivity to network television as well. God help us. You could be trying to tell people how a sitcom should end as it's like going on or something. I don't know. So yeah, interactivity, which we addressed earlier by feedback, but is now, we could also talk about it as interactivity and chat and all that type of stuff. Why digital? Well, we talked about the ability of digital to, so again, more stuff to talk about in terms of the here and now. Digitization, the most revolutionary innovation since printing press, I agree, because as we see, it's really freed up media to be many things. Olive?
So, you had skipped one characteristic that I
Oh,
want
did
to
I?
bring up about storage.
Let's do it.
DVD. I just got the new MacBook Pro, ProBook, whatever it's called, and there's no DVD player.
Oh yeah, it's been that way for a while.
Perfect example of
Oh, yeah.
different storage. So I had to buy a separate DVD player so I can watch all my Harry Potter movies. But I'm sorry, it's an addiction. But it's a good example about how
Hey, Nika.
they are just trying to get everyone back onto iTunes or podcasts.
Right.
Whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's a good example, though, about how this mass media is changing very quickly.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a big push to locate things in the cloud, and so another thing that we've seen, which I've noticed just recently, is if you look at the history of storage, right? There, first again, old school broadcasting. The idea was that you would just consume it when it was broadcast, and that's it. And then Sony and ABC, they create those video recorders that people can have in their home. And as we'll see, there's a whole controversy in the industry. It's like, should we allow people to tape this stuff? And it had to go to the Supreme Court with Mr. Rogers from PBS coming in and saying, children should be allowed to record my show so that they can watch it. And they won the day. So it became acceptable fair use to record a show for your own purposes if it was broadcast. But there was a moment there, or more than a moment, there was a controversy where that might not have been allowed. So then you got to that where it was cool to do a tape for yourself. But then you got cable companies which would say, well, we can, record this show. Basically, TiVo's the next step of storage. And there was more controversies around that. As TiVo, we all know what TiVos are, right, too? Your personal digital recorders. Well, there was another company, which Blue was in the title. I can't remember the name of it. But we can look at it. So what they were TiVo, but they also had an Ethernet connection. So you could basically upload anything that you TiVo'd, you could upload it to the internet immediately. So imagine what the broadcasters thought about that. So what we saw there was like NBC investing, or the parent company of NBC, investing in TiVo, and basically the industry moving to cut out this alternative, which Mark Andreessen, the guy who became rich through Netscape, which is now Firefox, he was heavily invested in the competitor, but they shut it down because it was viewed as like a portal for video piracy and stuff. So storage, there's all these interesting little stories about how storage is developed, but they seem to want to get away completely from us having a tangible copy that we can share. I mean, I think the elimination of a DVD player is in part they want to make a nice skinny computer that they can sell, for sure. But I think the drive to putting things in the cloud and having everyone stream it is that then you don't own a file that you can actually share. So I think it's an attack on piracy as well. Richard?
I mean, we can always download it and store it.
Yeah, store it on your computer, you mean?
Hard drive, your personal hard drive.
Yeah. Well, I guess the point here is that different media have different sort of storage mechanisms involved, and Olive's point is, they're changing as well. DVD, I guess, is on its way out. It's sort of low resolution. It's a physical disc.
Just like the CD players when we would listen when we were younger, now we listen on our phones or an iPod or.
Yep. And I have over 2,000 CDs at home, and what am I going to do with them? Damn, I put it in. I know, they're worthless. Well, they're almost worthless. Right, so everyone would rather that you subscribe or buy, something on iTunes and leave that up there. And yeah, it's a big transformation. Yeah, definitely. Cloud, paper, housing large amounts of information. I mean, another thing is just like, do you guys feel entirely safe with, for instance, putting your pictures up online and having no copy of them yourself? That's another issue. Either privacy or just will it be taken down and disappear and you won't have it anymore. Anyone concerned about that particularly? Micah?
I keep a copy of everything I post,
Yeah.
just physically for myself. But
Yeah, on your own local storage.
Yeah.
kinda. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I do too. Okay.
I think people have kind of, I don't know, maybe because of the cloud and all that, have really gotten out of backing up data. I mean,
There's so much to back up now.
there
Yeah.
really is. I mean, and there's the cloud.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm still the old flash drive girl. I gotta have something
Nice.
because if this phone breaks or gets wet or something, my shit gone.
I know.
And that cloud, I don't know now. I don't know.
Well, another thing though is if you look back, another thing that's funny is, we in our other class we talked about dead tree resources, stuff that's printed on paper. So it's just interesting to me that that digital somehow feels very ephemeral. You can move it around all over the data, you can copy it, you can share it, but at the end of the day, I'm always worried that it's going to disappear versus something that's tangible in your hand, a book that's printed or something like, or photos that are printed. Not that I print all my photos, but that has a kind of a permanence, which I just find it strange and interesting that digital is so flexible but so ephemeral. That's all. And again, the web, if you ever go back, like, oh, an amazing article. I know it was on this site, and a day and a half later, it's gone. You know what I mean? It's like, well, where did that go? Now I can't find it. You're doing searches and stuff, keywords, and you just can't find it. And that's another manifestation of this kind of ephemerality of digital information versus, the book. It was there. It was in the library or something like that. Maybe that's an illusion, but it's a difference. Micah?
like it's the same with this class. Like I was going to stream today, but then my power went out.
Really?
So I had to come in, and this is kind of like stable, and you really can't get rid
We're
of it.
here.
Without power, streaming is useless.
Got you. Interesting. I was worried about Soundcloud, which is a resource that we use a lot in our summer class, and then I heard that they practically closed down again because they can't sort of make SoundCloud a functional business. Although they have a huge user base and they should be able to do it, but it has never really stabilized. And they haven't closed it down. No, they changed the terms of agreement and stuff, but they've come very close to closing it a couple of times. And the other thing is one of their the terms of agreement changes. A lot of people are doing remix tapes and stuff, so they were threatened by the copyright holders and stuff, and they took down files, closed accounts. They basically, took people offline, but completely wiped out their information, like their creativity. So if they didn't have local copies of their music, it was gone,
Right.
And they were entirely within their rights because everyone who used the service had, checked that little box which said, this stuff is ours. So, that's a terrible thing to happen. Imagine. Richard?
I am so sorry to be this guy, but if they did those things and if it was their creativity, I think that they would have a backup. I would suggest.
I hope so.
I would think that if they didn't have a backup, sorry, but it was your mistake.
Yeah.
There's nothing else you can do because
Yeah.
I think that's the world we live in. Because you gotta be careful unless you're. That's reality. If you're not careful, you're effed up. You know what I mean? So
If you're not careful,
I think that a backup is a must in
Yeah.
the digital
Yeah.
world. Whatever you do, you need to have a backup.
Some
Be
type.
careful with it. Yeah. Cool. Alrighty. Dramatic changes. What dramatic changes? Yes, we've had dramatic changes. We've been talking about that. Digital terrestrial radio. Well, we kind of mentioned that a little bit as I was mentioning my own research like 20 years ago was into digital satellite radio, but it was in Canada. But it is informative as well. I don't know. Should we inform ourselves on it today? Here in the United States, digital radio has not taken off as a commercial reality, whereas in most of the rest of the world it has. I think I saw a couple of years ago now a news piece like Norway has completely eliminated its analog radio broadcasting. It's all digital satellite radio. So some countries are way far ahead. But the reason they are is because they have usually a strong centralized public broadcaster like the BBC or the CBC or the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And those usually lead the way towards switching over to digital. And they typically have a pretty well-organized radio industry versus our media industries are really very independent one from the other. And the regulator here is much less involved than it is in most other countries. So, you saw in 2009, they mandated that we switch all our TVs over to high definition TVs, right? And now we've got 4K on the horizon, all right? That took years and years to engineer that whole transition, So what we see here in radio is a business which is so challenged already that they're not going to force radio broadcasters to switch over to digital. So we still have analog FM and AM radio, but there is a system called IBOC, which stands for in-band on channel, which allows, believe it or not, you can continue your old analog radio broadcasts, but also mix into the same frequency a digital signal. And so your analog reset will just get your plain old radio broadcast. But anyone with a digital receiver can get on the same frequency digital, and in fact, several channels of different digital radio on that channel. So it's an ingenious engineering feat. It's been around for more than 10 years, but there's not the economics in the radio industry to convince anybody that they've got to invest in a whole digital infrastructure. And there's not enough audience out there who wants IBOC in order to make it work. So. There's an example, I guess, if you're looking for how innovation happens, it's a very complex type of thing that goes on, but you need the audience, you need the interest, and the question then becomes, well, if we put the device out there, like what goes first? People clamoring for better quality digital radio, or digital radio people wanting to sell that technology out to us? Better radio exists, but people are, the industry doesn't really have the guts to go and do it. That's basically it, or the money to go and do it. So it's an interesting example of how the best media isn't always the medium that actually works or that goes through, So everything has to be in place for it. Oh gosh, all right. Oh yeah, another interesting thing that you may have some thoughts on is in terms of how we find programming, which used to be carefully orchestrated where you'd have, mass media with promotions within mass media that would promote other stuff. But now, and of course in your newspaper, you'd have a listing of channels and what was on that day.
TV Guide.
And TV Guide, right. Legendary publication, which is still out there, I guess, but kind of changed its
That's all I used to use when I was...
Is that right? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't even watch that. I would just be scrolling.
I remember there was always like so many channel options. I could never figure out if we could really get them or not.
Like at the time and the channel, and you're like...
Right. Can we get that? Can we get? And then you'd be like going, we can't get that.
Yeah.
But talk about how you find new stuff now compared to maybe how you used to find new stuff.
It's just a digital version of a TV guide. You just go. I would just go on the internet, name,
On
date,
TV, you mean?
and it'll just any media.
Oh, so this is if you know that the show already exists, right? And where can I see it? But yeah, exactly. So how about discovery as well as just scheduling stuff? Corey?
Nowadays, a lot of people are finding new forms of media, like TV shows, later, like I'd say after a season's already over and they're watching some Netflix, what show to watch? Oh, what's this? I heard something about it. And because you watched, the other shows that were just like it, Netflix is suggesting it to you. And you start watching
Gotcha.
it there.
Okay, so there's a bunch of things there. There's like the asynchronous, extreme asynchronicity of catching up with something. There's the recommendation engines that online platforms will use to send you places. And also stumbling around within a library full of full of television shows now, and just like, oh, what's this? Or, oh, I like that. Who did that? And go on to the next person. So those are three sort of current experiences which would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Yeah.
Huge trending things on social media. So a lot of people are talking about The Bachelor or Game of Thrones.
Right.
So now it's like, I want to know more about that. I want to be in the loop.
Right.
And you just start watching it because of that.
Right, right. So a huge upscaling of the water cooler.
Exactly.
Did you see this? What? And now, yeah. So that's another unique thing. So others, but I think you're already coming up with a lot. Gino?
Kind of an obvious one, but recommendations from friends.
Yeah, right. And so they could be mediated or they could be face to face, right? Yeah. And then dropping in through, another thing that I know broadcasters or streaming companies are really interested in is knowing where their traffic comes from. So with the internet, providing a much more detailed view of where and when your audience is coming to you, so that they know, where you were clicks before you actually arrive and stream the stuff. And they actually make programming decisions based on that kind of thing. I thought I heard a knock, but yeah. You could imagine if you were in the business of attracting an audience, it would be immensely important to you as to how people come to new stuff, or just find out where they can access your stuff. So it's been a big change now that we just described, these new ways of discovering programming, where it used to be simply, again, you just put up some teasers for something that's coming. You maybe, advertise your show on a bus or on a billboard or something like that, which again, why iHeartRadio, for instance, the other part of their business is billboards. Clear Channel is billboards and radio. And where's the connection with that, by the way, just off the top of your heads? Why would radio and billboards go together? Driving, right? So their target audience is in the car. So what are the two media to reach people in the car? It's billboards and radio, So that's why they're the biggest in that particular niche in the broadcast. So, but yeah, to get back on topic is just we're seeing a big difference in the way that media is promoted and people come to it. And then of course, you're trying to intervene. It's much more difficult to intervene in social networks of uncontrolled audience who are discussing a show or stuff like that. So there's that's being monitored now. It's another thing, and it's even affecting ratings in the sense that ratings just used to have to count how many people were tuned in on TV. But now ratings also accounts for, how active is Twitter around this. And there are companies that even kind of rate, were the comments good or bad? And they're feeding back that information, So that's, there's a section in the textbook called Big Data, which is, again, that's part of it. It's like now audiences are being monitored so much more closely than they ever could be. Okay, well, 10 minutes left. Dare I try a Kahoot? So how many people, I know JP has done a Kahoot in a class. Has anybody else done a Kahoot in a class? A Kahoot is, it's sort of like it's kind of like a live in-person quiz. But it can be used, first of all, what we do now will not be for credit, but it's just a way of showing you some quiz questions in advance and seeing how we all, did we understand stuff? Did we retain stuff? So, and the cool thing about a Kahoot is that it gives you a link in which you can, to which you can open the link and participate in this thing. And so the people who are streaming could do this just as much as the people who are in the classroom, which is why I want to start using this. I don't know it too well, but basically this is going to be a 10-question quiz about some of the stuff we talked about over the last couple of days. And it's not for credit, but these will, your answers would help me out to know if you've understood stuff. And also, these are questions that could appear on a quiz or on a midterm. So it's a good one to try to review. So there's bells and whistles associated with this. And so I think we're going to go classic, right? And So this is how it works. If we go full screen here, I don't have any control over volume, but Jody, you might want to turn down some of that great music. So let's see. What we have to do is log into something here. And so there is the ID. But where do we go to do this? Oh, Gino, you're in. Rich, you guys know where you're going. So where are you guys going? Where are you getting? Are you going to Kahoot?
Downloaded the app.
Oh, so you have the app? Okay.
Like just did it.
There's an app, or you can also go on just.
IT.
Thanks, JP. Let me see if I can join this too. Kahoot.it. There it is. Oh, okay, so go to Kahoot.it and then enter the PIN 565059. Go, Paul. I hope you're in there. If
It's taking a really long time just for the,
okay,
the main page.
because I'm going to run out of time if I don't. All right.
Oh, 059.
How do I pause this here? That's way too fast. Okay, hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. Wait.
Stations off
Did-
channels and frequency.
How do you answer?
You click on either the blue or the red. True or false?
Wait, what was the question?
The question's at the question's at
Yeah, okay, hang on. These are set too fast. 8 got it right, 1 got it wrong, but hang on a sec.
That would be me.
Before we move on.
Didn't even answer. Yeah, I didn't
I'm in
even get
10th place and tied with Sandra.
All right. Well, I don't want to end. I think I probably have to end the game in order to adjust that. But clearly, 20 seconds is not enough. So, but let's just soldier on, and I'll because I don't have time to redo this. But next time I'll put up a nice long period of time. Let's do the next question here. Oh, that's what. Okay, I don't know what that's all about. Convergence happens when different types of media become the same. That's way too short. So the question now appears up here.
Oh, dang it.
No.
Convergence happens when different types of media become the same.
It tricked me.
Did it?
Yes.
How did it do that?
Colors.
Switch the color.
Oh, it switched the colors? Okay.
True or false?
It means we have to be paying attention.
No.
10 true, 4 false.
Oh, correct.
Well, answer
Yeah, it switched the colors, so it's just like,
It switched the colors. Why did it do that? Maybe to keep us interested?
yeah.
Okay, okay. So, just to clarify, remember we talked about how, audio, video, and text can all be delivered down the same digital pipeline, how those media types are kind of becoming the same in their way. Okay, let's hit the next one, see how this is. Okay, the scoreboard, I have to understand that. Localism doesn't matter to radio stations anymore. Okay, I didn't even talk about this one, so answer away. Do you think localism, do you think the local identity of a radio station is important? Does it matter that it's here in the Bay Area, or would we just like to hear? Okay, see what you guys say here.
It's shaming you.
I'm going to say true. I'm going to say true. So what happens? When do we go? 06, 5, 4,
I remember I drove into Vegas
2,
station.
1. How come it displays? It displays.
Incorrect.
Oh, 9 thought it was false. 6 thought it was true. The actual answer is true. Okay, localism is important. I know, but I didn't even mention it or teach it. So.
Did you create this?
Yes, I did this one. Yeah. How come? It's too good. Last night, sort of at midnight. Someone had their hand up. Said Corey.
It says false to localism doesn't matter.
Oh, darn. Okay. Yeah, I made a mistake there. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So it's true. Oh my God. Now I'm really doing harm.
Midnight.
Go, Paul.
Question it says, or I don't know,
It
every time
is
you get an
false.
answer
That's
right,
right.
there's points, or your points go up, is that?
I don't even know about that yet.
Oh.
But none of it's for credit. None of it's for credit. And it would all depend on me actually getting the correct answers in this. But the right answer is localism. Localism matters because you don't have much to work against Spotify or something which has an endless library of music that anybody wants. But what you do have is you're here now, and you can relay the word of the community or tell us about what things are going on. So there's a big push in broadcasting, local broadcasting, to be relevant there. Okay, whose model of communication is known as the mathematical model? That was the one that had it's going too fast. But that was the one that had a sender.
What does BNC mean?
And
Share notes.
for sure. Yeah, go right ahead. So that one would have a sender,
I just didn't answer.
transmitter,
Oh, scram.
a channel, and
Hey, one person got it.
that was a tough one.
I was gonna say
Shrimp.
What are the yellows and greens? Oh, okay. Well, the yellow one is, Shannon and Weaver's model. So if we can just, let me just show you what Shannon and Weaver's model actually looked like. Where are we? That's it, the mathematical model of communication, which from the current slide. Remember, so there's the information source, the transmitter, the channel, the receiver, the destination, the noise. So remember, this became a metaphor, a model used for all communication, but in fact, it was developed to try to mathematically analyze the noise that could happen within a communication system. So we'll head on. This is really rock and roll. I'm glad we're doing it. Which is considered the nation's first mass medium? Newspapers, books, the telegraph, or the radio? Which one would you answer? Just think about it. Remember, mass means from a source, from a publisher, to a large group of people. What would that have been?
Yeah, I probably got this one. Dang it, yeah.
And newspapers, and that is the correct answer. I'll vouch for that. All right, what do you call messages that are received almost instantaneously after transmission?
Asynchronous.
Almost, well, let's say immediately. Semantics are going to trouble us here. So a message, like as soon as it comes out, people get it. It's not stored away forever. Right. Synchronous, the correct answer, okay? So remember, that would refer to like immediately, yeah, right? Oh, so the non-mediated and immediated, yes. But we mentioned synchronous and asynchronous in our lecture. What is probably the most revolutionary innovation since the printing press? It was in today's slides. Digitization of mediated content, monetizing the marketplace of ideas, consolidation, convergence. So what was identified as the most revolutionary development? The digitization of mediated content. Okay, that's a big deal. Not that the others aren't important, but that is the biggest deal. Which kind of an effect is it when we learn something from the mass media? Is it emotional? Is it physical? Is it cognitive? Or is it behavioral? It relates to media uses. So we learn something. When we learn something, is it more emotional, or is it physical, or is it cognitive, or behavioral? Cognitive. Oh, everyone did well on that. Almost everybody. Right, yeah. So you're learning something, you're thinking more than you're behaving. But all of the other options are, also ways that we've described how people use media. All right, let's move on. Question 9 out of 10. We're almost done. Which of the following statements is true? Oh, the Fairness Doctrine is no longer, okay, this one we didn't really talk about, regulation. So take a guess. I'll give you the Fairness Doctrine is definitely true, okay? So the Fairness Doctrine was this idea that there was a regulation where if you had a right-wing person on your channel, you also had to have a left-wing. All right, so that was pretty even. I didn't teach that one, so you shouldn't know that one. And then the final one, what social benefit do you get from watching and listening to electronic media? Talk about it with others. Stay current, just so you know the stuff. Pass the time. Learn about stuff.
I think, is it probably all of them are correct, probably?
Yes, all of these are correct. You can all have a point. This will boost your scores. They're all correct. There you go. All right. Well, thank you for participating in that. I learned a lot. As you can tell, I know almost nothing about
I love how there's a rating thing on it.
about what Kahoots are. Sorry?
Scoreboard? Yeah, no, we can rate like how the test was.
Yeah, okay. Be gentle, please.
Code the same code every time you log on to that.
To the Kahoot, I think it gives you a different code each time.
You had the code up there. How did
Right.
the code?
That was
I think for that same test,
the sign-in test.
It'll be different.
Is that something you'd want to go back and review? Is that it, Gopal? Is
Not
that?
this test. It's if I want to come on here again.
Yeah. So I think it's Kahoot.it and the unique code for the test. But let me find out if you're able to proactively review, because those are good questions for exams. And I'll fix the right answer. Okay. Cool. Well, have a good Labor Day weekend, guys.